A new survey shows that the vast majority of employees feel a pressure of calling in sick, so many times they just go in anyway. Is that good? The US only guarantees workers unpaid sick leave, leaving them to choose between two essentials, their health and a paycheck. Gas money, food, rent, mortgage, whatever hell else it is you gotta pay for, childcare, sports teams, you gotta go to work. Nearly 90% of US workers say they worked through sickness over the past 12 months, according to a survey from Bamboo HR. And despite the COVID-19 pandemic temporarily shining a spotlight on worker health, sick leave policies in the US remain subpar. Nearly 65% of workers say they experience stress, anxiety, guilt, or fear. Guilt, that's the worst part about this. Guilt or fear when requesting sick time from their employer. So the Bamboo HR survey also found 25%, or 1 in 4 workers, say they've been either pressured or explicitly asked to work while they've been sick. And they're reluctant to take this time off because, of course, part of workers' reluctance to take it off is the current economic climate, as employers are conducting more layoffs and have regained some of their leverage they lost during the Great Resignation when many of these workers were choosing to leave their positions. So now we got the power back. You guys are scared to actually not be at work sick. More, Anita Grantham, who's head of HR at Bamboo HR, gave some more context. She says, in the salaried workforce, people are feeling taxed. It's a tough environment with no economic relief in sight, and there's no federalized support or care that leads to a compounding effect, which we're seeing in the data. They're going to work. They're going to work because they need their jobs. They need their benefits, of course. So again, I think we've all seen it, David, throughout whatever careers or jobs that anyone's ever had. It's, man, that cough's coming on. I'm going to be looking like the sick guy in the office or anywhere, say even at the, as simple as your fast food restaurant workers, your grocery store workers, anywhere else where it's absolutely essential and someone's missing, that changes the whole dynamic. Then, of course, you have supervisors, owners of companies, if it's small enough, saying, yo, we need you here no matter what. And then what happens then is they actually don't work well either. I'll get to those points in a second, but first, your thoughts on this. Have you experienced this type of guilt?
Yeah, I think I've been on both sides of the equation here. There have been times where I felt guilty, and then there have been times for calling out sick because I thought, oh, I'm leaving some of my colleagues in a lurch or a show in the lurch or whatnot. Then there are other times where I've shown up and felt guilty about that because I knew that I was sick and I'm endangering my colleagues in the work environment that I'm seeing. So this is a tough one. I just, I do wish that in the United States there were more incentives for people, if you're legitimately sick, to be able to just stay home and not worry and just take care of yourself and get better. Because when people are not productive at work, when they're not efficient, when they're feeling distracted because they've got a terrible flu, those are, it's not the kind of, productivity you're gonna get out of them anyway.
Here's part of the guilt. Again, I said the guilt is the worst thing. Graphic 4, almost 80% of managers say they've been skeptical of sick day requests, according to the survey. While employers might think they benefit from workers underutilizing sick days, when an employee comes to work sick, they deliver poor results, can infect others, obviously, and their health worsens. If a company's workforce isn't physically and mentally well, and there's mistrust between leaders and team members, performance will suffer, is what Anita Grantham then also said, also from that HR company, which this is what sticks out the most to me on this whole thing. You have this process, you're a boss. I've been supervisors, I've had people beneath me in work settings before. I've had to do hiring, all that type of stuff. I've conducted interviews. Now, if I've hired someone and I think that they're willing to fake sickness, want to take time off that they're really not sick about, want to bail on the job and leave it to whoever else to pick up the slack, that's a character flaw. Or you think that the person maybe doesn't like their job or doesn't like you or wants to sabotage whatever. If your approach is, this person's looking to do me wrong or skirt on their responsibilities, maybe you hired a bad character person. And maybe you should look into that deeper. Or maybe you should see maybe why if you think they're lying, why do they not want to be around you? What about this job is unhealthy for them, makes them want to run away? If you think they're lying about it, maybe you should look into ways to make them want to be a part of this, where they feel some kind of connection to the job or some kind of benefit from them doing their job outside of doing it for you. Because that's all you're thinking about is yourself, boss, and going, you're just trying to screw me over. That's a hostile interaction or I guess a relationship that you could have with your employees. Why do we feel we have to have an adversarial reaction and relationship with our employees? It breeds things like this, and now there's mistrust. And if you think you don't trust them, how much do you think they trust you?
I'm so glad, Jayar, that you brought it back to the managers, because I think the best managers out there are the ones who will encourage their employees. If you're not feeling well, don't come in. If you need a mental health day, don't come in, because none of us are perfect. None of us are the Lou Gehrig's or Cal Ripkins who can show up every day for 20 years. Most of us are going to have bad days. And yeah, there are going to be some days when you're sick or you're just not feeling it. Stay home. But I've also seen the flip side of that, in which managers who, no, you got to be there. And I'm like, okay, boss, I'll be there. And thankfully with, broadcasting and television, there've been times where bosses said, try to come in, I'll come in and I can't speak. And I'm like, okay, you're getting a show with somebody's talking like this because, and then they're like, oh, you should stay home because your voice is shot. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I was saying a few hours ago. There's all, but I do think this says a lot more about your bosses and management than it might ever say about you. And unfortunately, there's some people out there who are not very good managers. Like everything else, there are bad, rotten apples in everything, including in management.
Why aren't the incentives for positive versus negative? Because you make guilt and hate and all that. That's your incentives to get someone to come in. Why can't it be positive? You might actually have someone that's going to go above and beyond.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.